Want to make a difference in your community but not sure how? Go to GoFundMe.com right now and start a GoFundMe. Seriously. Your next fundraiser doesn't have to start in a school parking lot or a church basement. You can start a GoFundMe today in just minutes. Fundraise for yourself, a friend, or family member, or an organization. All that matters is that you care about them. GoFundMe is the trusted place to fundraise for what you care about. With no pressure to hit your fundraising goal, but tons of tools to help you reach it, you can confidently start fundraising right now. Whether it's creative, local, or critical, your cause matters. And there's a reason why GoFundMe is backed by millions and chosen by fundraisers everywhere. It works, and it matters. GoFundMe helps you make a real difference. Start your GoFundMe today at GoFundMe.com. That's GoFundMe.com. GoFundMe.com. This is a commercial message brought to you by GoFundMe.
All right, so this is in the biz. We call this episode 0. And episode 0 is we get to learn about the main characters in the podcast, their interest, what this podcast is about, and we do not necessarily a deep dive into who we are and what we do, but you get to know a little bit about us before we jump into the topic of what this podcast is being created for. And so I think the best thing to do, Kyle, is at this point, we talk about who we are and we talk about what this podcast is going to be about. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to kick it off. All right. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to pass the ball to you and we're going to run with it. Okay.
Great. Let's do that.
All right. So my name is Dan Johnson. I live in the same town as Kyle, and we met through our sons being very good friends with each other. And we got to share the story from yesterday about the missing child.
Oh gosh, yeah,
yeah. We're gonna have to share that story. Okay. But I own a podcast network. I'm the founder of this podcast network, and that's why we've decided to come together on this podcast. I have 3 children. I've been married for 12 years. I'm 44 years old, and I have been podcasting now for, I think, over 10 years, believe it or not. Wow. I was in a cubicle job before this, and I'm that type of person who I just was not meant to sit in a cubicle. I felt like I was in a cage, and so I decided to kind of step off and do something different and crazy, and here we are today. But that's the very high level what you need to know. I am in this partnership. It's like there's the professional, which is you, and why you're here. And then there's me, which if you watch It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, every group needs a wild card. And I guess I'm that person. So I'm the not professional in this.
I think you're underestimating me. I think you're simultaneously underestimating and overestimating me, which I think I appreciate. Thank you.
Well, that's a huge zone, though, to fill. If you're underestimating somebody and overestimating somebody, dude, you have a big range to thrive in.
Yeah. As George Bush would say, you misunderestimate me.
Yeah, okay. We're quoting Bush now, huh?
Yeah, I just got to kick it off with a G.W. Bush quote. Okay.
Kyle, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. No, first of all, I think you're the brains and the brawn behind it. I'm happy to follow your lead. Thanks for the invite and the idea that you had to trigger all of this. I'm Kyle. I'm 42 years old. I've been married for almost 10 years. This will be my 10-year anniversary with my beautiful wife. I have 2 younger kids, and then I have 2 older stepkids. So I also have that dynamic in my life of having a blended family and coming into a kind of pre-established family. I'm a social worker and a psychotherapist. I've been in that field for about 14 years now and love that. And, it's funny, I sit all day long and talk to folks, and I'm a lot like you that I think I was built to move, and it's really hard for me to sit all day long. Yeah. But I have 2 pretty distinct parts of my personality, one being the highly empathetic, caring, in tune, like wanting to be there to help. And then I also have my inner border collie that just wants to like run and go and play and
Yeah.
build and dig and do all the things. And so I'm not fully sure why my sitting still empathetic side won out as far as careers go, but it's definitely difficult.
Yeah. Which you said the reason why you're here, right? Who like I think the dynamic between us is really going to work because whenever we like men tend to go off the rails sometimes, but it's awesome to get back on the rails with a professional like thought process, how you break it down. Cause I'm old school in a way where I'm like, if there's a problem, you yell, you scream, you stomp your foot, you flex your muscles, and I'm a man, and that's how I handle that shit.
Right.
And what I like about you is you can say like, well, maybe there's a time and place for that, but then maybe there's a time and place for this approach.
Right.
And so that's this connection.
Yep.
And I think this is, my gut is telling me this podcast is going to work for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I feel the same. Like I said, I've been a counselor for 14 years, and one thing that I've learned, not through my book education, but just through lived experience is how similar therapy can be to just having a really good friend.
Right.
And I think a lot of people, there are a lot of people who don't quote unquote need to go to therapy because they have a great friend in their life, or they have great friends, generally speaking. And they have people that can talk them down from the ledge or offer different ways of doing things. And so, yeah, I think it's funny because a lot of my conversations with you or other friends that I have really similar to conversations that I would have with somebody in counseling. It's just I actually know you.
Yeah.
And, part of why I'm excited to do this podcast is because the nature of my job is very one-sided, and it's awesome. That's what I signed up for. But, I do use my life as an example with my clients, but that time's not about me. And I shouldn't be taking up, someone else's therapy time to talk about my stuff. And as I'm meeting with the client, I've got lots of ideas triggered. There's lots of things I want to say. There's lots of ways that I connect with my clients. Lots of similarities and like stuff I'd like to say that would help us like dive deeper and become more friends, but that's not what they're there for. They're not there to become friends with me. And so I find myself holding back a lot. Not a lot in helping them, but just there's a lot of other thoughts that I could be sharing. And it's really nice to be able to have an informal place to talk, because I don't have to be as careful with how I express my thoughts or craft my words when I meet with you. And also it'll just be really nice for this to be a true back and forth where we can both share the load, and it's okay for me to share personal stuff, and it's okay for me I can use my therapist brain with a friend of mine without having to be 100% in a therapy lens. So I'm really excited about that.
Absolutely. And I'll just kind of how this whole thing started was, I believe we met for coffee one day. After the kids got on the bus, after the boys got on the bus, we hopped on and we met for coffee, and it was like a venting session. It was almost like we both needed to talk about this.
Right.
Now, I don't know about you. I come from a family background where like the men did not show emotion. Like the men, like I love my dad. He's a great dad, awesome dad, period. I'll say that. But I bet you I've only heard him say I love you I'm 44. Maybe he did when I was younger and I can't remember it, but I've never heard, like, I bet you I've maybe under 10 times in 44 years says I love you. He's not comfortable saying that word. He's not comfortable like doing the hugs. It's almost like a bro hug that he does. Meanwhile, I tell my kids every single day out loud, I love you. Like, I don't know if I'm like making up for that, or like maybe that's what I want, but now I am giving that to my kids. And so anyway, that whole conversation sparked this idea. It's like, dude, this podcast, started, I feel like, because I need to talk to someone as well. And so we had a pretty interesting conversation about what we're going to talk about here. And it's like, obviously we're married, obviously some of the not to each other. Yeah. Right.
For the clarification.
For clarification, we are married to women, right? In like not the same woman, but
lots of different dynamics out there.
Exactly. And we don't want this to be we're going to shit here and bash our wives, right? Type of podcast. But we have frustrations in marriage. We have frustrations in parenting. And when I sat down and vented to you that one day about some of the things that I was frustrated with in my life, I walked away from that feeling really good. And like, thank God I had someone to vent this to instead of doing what a lot of men do. And that's swallowing it down deep inside of them until it comes out in rage. So,
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think our society does a really poor job of training people how to manage emotions, and especially men. Everything that you said reminds me a lot of my own upbringing. That love my dad to death. He's an awesome dad. He has a huge heart. He would do anything for myself and my brothers. You said you've heard him say "I love you" less than 10 times. I don't think my dad's ever said it to me. I don't think I've ever heard my dad say "I love you." And I know that he does. He shows with his actions. He's always there. He always shows up. No task is too big. No task is too small. He's extremely generous. I think he's just a product of his environment. I bet his dad never said "I love you" to him. And my dad, I'm sure, was way more involved in my life than his dad was in his. And yet my dad wasn't very involved in my life at all until I was much older. I think he didn't know how to be. I don't think he knew what to do with kids. He didn't go to any of my sporting stuff or anything like that until I was in maybe a junior or senior in high school. But it's funny because as he's gotten older, he's really softened a lot, and it's been really beautiful to get to know him in that way. I'll be really interested to hear how your relationship with your dad has changed over the years. We'll get into that. You said this all started when we had that conversation after we got the boys on the bus. I actually want to kick it back way farther than that to when this really started, which was the first time that I met you, which I don't know if you remember. We were at there's a little park in our town for the really little kids, and there's a big park for all the kids. And we were at the little park, which is all the tiny little play equipment that big kids would be bored with. And I was there with my son, and you were there with your son, and we just started chatting, and I thought you were fun and interesting. And for everybody that's only listening to this and can't see, like, Dan's only got 9 fingers. He's missing the finger on one of his hands. And I bet money lots of people noticed that about you, Dan. And I was like, oh, hey, like, notice you're missing a finger. What happened there? And I think you fed me some line of bullshit. I don't think you told me the truth about that. And then, later I met your wife, and she said, oh, yeah, he tells a different story every time somebody asks. And I was like, oh, that's fun and funny. But my point being, I liked you from the moment I met you. You were fun. You were interesting. I think we're lucky that our sons have like a good group of friends and a good group of parents that are also fun and interesting. But man, you know what has really struck me about parenthood that I hoped would happen, that I didn't know if it would or not, was all these dads that are involved. Like, if you think about the kind of friend group that we've developed just because our kids got to know each other in like daycare and preschool and stuff.
Oh yeah,
man, it's a group of cool parents. I'm so pleasantly surprised at how much the dads are involved. You coach, you're always at the things, your kids well, you're part of discipline, you're part of like cooking dinner, you're part of all the things. I see you around the neighborhood driving the golf cart. You've always got a load of kids, like. and again, not to put my dad down, but like that would have not been my dad at all. He was all about work, thought that play was a waste of time, was frustrated with me if I was playing. I would hope that he would forget about me during the day, because if he remembered me, he'd be like, oh yeah, I could put Kyle to work. And he did. So like, it's kind of classic. If you hear dad starting to come in the house, you're like, oh, damn it. Because
Yeah.
it's like, Kyle, come out here. I need you for a minute. And a minute was 2 hours. And it was going to
And
be
you
something
lived out in the
hard.
country.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I grew up on a farm, and my dad collects and restores antique cars. So it was always something like lifting something that was way too heavy for me, and dragging something that weighed 500 pounds a quarter mile, or just something ridiculous. So, but it's neat to see all these dads that I know right now, like really getting to participate and engage in their kids' lives. And I feel sorry for my dad for not getting to do that. Like he missed out on us when we were kids, because my parents were married and they're still together, but he missed out on us when we were kids, because my mom did everything. She cooked, she cleaned, she was there when we got off the bus, she was there when we complained about how bored we were, she did all the laundry, she did absolutely everything, and he worked. And God bless him, and he was a great provider in that way. And he would sometimes he'd be in a playful mood and we would enjoy playing. But to your earlier point, my relationship with my kids is so much different. And
100%.
I connected with you, and you were like, I don't know if it's because I didn't, I'm trying to give them what I didn't have. And I don't know if this is overkill. I don't know if I'm overdoing it.
Yeah.
I think I would rather err on the side of overdoing it than underdoing it. One thing that I've learned through counseling is that children spell love Time. And so the more time you can spend with your kids, the better your relationship is going to be with them. And, that's a thing that I see in you consistently is, everything that I'm at with my kids, like there you are with your kids. It's also not uncommon at all to see you without your wife. You've got one, two, or all three of your kids without your wife because she's doing something else that's important, or she needs some time. And there's Dan with all the kids, and they're doing something, and he's right there with them. Whether it's driving around the golf cart, going to the park, doing sports stuff, going to the trampoline park, like all that sort of thing. Man, that just did not exist for our parents' generation.
No.
But for a lot of them, I think some of my friends had similar-ish stuff to that. But I just think it's so neat.
Yeah. I think we can chalk a little bit of that up to culture as well, where my dad went into an office from 7 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon, if not later. He worked a ton. And then my mom, for part of her life, was a factory line worker. She also was like a dental assistant. She was, she worked for a company that made fireplaces, and she had different shifts in between there. And I think with us being able to work from home, like I own my own business. I work from home every single day, and I have the ability to create my schedule. I get to work as much or as little as I want. And the reason I've decided to take this path in life is for one reason. It's because of my children and the ability to say, hey man, if I want to go pick them up early pick them up from school, or if I want to go on a golf cart ride, or whatever the case is, we come from we have a completely different culture surrounding us now, where we have the opportunity to be more involved with our kids. I don't know about you. It's like, I know my dad didn't choose to not spend a ton of time with us. Like, if I was to compare what I'm doing versus what my dad is doing, I'm spending way more time with my kids, but I have the opportunity to do that because of the life that I've chosen, right? And so my dad was a coach. He coached everything until I got up into middle school, where there was already established coaching. Same with my brother. He did all the coaching on that side too. So he was involved, but it was a different type of, it was almost like overtime. It's like you work this job and then you go do something. Where me, it's like I decide to go do something with my kids, but then I have to pay for that on the back end, where I work till 10, 11 o'clock at night sometimes because of that. So, it's crazy. Like the way different, like this time era, how we treat women versus how our parents or even my grandparents treated women. It's completely different now. And so being in this generation where I've seen the change happen of how, like, what the roles of a man are versus what they are today.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see the change and the dynamic shift in this world.
Yeah. Yeah. What are the most obvious changes that you notice?
Like, men, I think from a mental standpoint, I feel like men just felt like emotion or caring for another person was a weakness. Like, men, that's what men felt like. Dude, if I love somebody, I'll tell them I love them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I care about someone or I think they're a cool dude, you're a cool dude, man. I think you're great. Like, I will go out of my way to go and tell somebody a good, positive thing about themselves.
Yeah.
But I feel like, you think my grandpas did that? Hell no. Like,
right.
they would feel like embarrassed if they would to tell, like, a friend or a buddy, like, hey man, I love you. Like, that just didn't happen in the 50s and 60s. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think there's that. And then the fact that women now play a role in the money that comes in financially into the house. So they're responsible for something. We're responsible for something. And we have to cross over in order to make the household work. As through my grandparents and even in my dad's era, that a man could still, the woman could stay at home, the man could work the full-time job, and they could make that work back then. But I just don't feel like that happens as much anymore. What about you?
Yeah. No, I think that the two income household is a major difference. Not that it's completely different than it was, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, but I think it's obviously a lot more prevalent now, having two incomes. I'm curious why you think you're able to be the way that you are, considering the way that your dad was and his dad and his dad. What do you think gives you the ability to be in tune with your emotions like that and able to say, like, hey, you're a cool guy, and not feel weirded out by talking about emotions? Because, again, for those of you that don't know Dan, like, Dan's a manly man, Dan's a hunter dude. Dan looks really masculine. Dan would look imposing and intimidating if you didn't know how soft he really was, if you didn't know that he likes his belly scratched. But Dan also has the laughing side. But I would say that Dan doesn't have a resting laughter face.
Right.
So why do you think you're able to be in touch with your emotions and tell people that you like them and tell people that you love them and compliment other men and things like that? How come you're able to do that if your dad wasn't?
I don't know, dude. I think what I've seen over the course of this life, especially losing grandparents. I've lost a stepmom to cancer. I've lost, I know people who have lost important people in their lives. And I think if you don't tell someone, like, you can say, or you can do, let's say, for example, my boy, right? If I've never told him that I've loved him, right? I show him that I love him, right? By doing the activities and supporting him and building him up. But if I never say it, it's never said, right? And so I think actions are important, but I also feel that in certain instances, words are equally important. Mm-hmm. And so if you never actually tell somebody, man, I love you, I think you're awesome, or you're doing great, then they never hear it, which is part of absorbing anything in life. You see it with your eyes, you feel it with your skin, and you hear it with your ears. I feel like showing someone that you appreciate, like, appreciation is verbal, in my opinion, and it's also an action. So I feel like that's, I don't know, that's why I do it, and why, like, I want people to know how I feel about them.
Yeah. I love what you just said. When you, I felt a cool emotion when you said, when they can see it with their eyes, they can feel it with their skin, and they can hear it with their ears.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that's so true. I think that's a really neat lens to look at showing affection and showing love through, because I think those are really important. I think I say I love you, and I'm definitely more on the emotional end. You know, my friends joke with me that there's a side of my personality that they call sensitive Kyle. And, you know, like I'm actually I like to joke around a lot.
Yep.
I was voted class clown in high school in the senior yearbook and all of that stuff, right? Like I like to joke around, and I'm, you know, in certain friend groups, I can be very ruthless and joking around and giving my friends a hard time, and we all do that, and it's a lot of fun. I don't do that. I read the room. I don't do that in every group that I'm in. You know, but I also have a really sensitive side. And as you were talking about how you're able to do that, I was reflecting on why I'm able to. And I think there's a couple of reasons. I think one reason for me is I would basically say that I was raised by women. I think I spent a lot more time around women. Obviously, I spent a lot of time around my mom, and she did a really good job of saying I love you. And then just the jobs that I've had and the career that I'm in is like highly dominated by women, and it's just a kind of a softer, I don't know, it's just a softer environment, to be really honest. And for women that have never been in an environment with men, they're completely different. I've worked jobs that's almost all men or all men, and it's a very, very different feel. So I think being raised by women helped me do it. I do think that I say I love you, even to my friends. Like I've got best friends from kindergarten, first grade, second grade that I'm still friends with today. And like, you know, I consider them best friends, and I'm 42 years old. I do think I say it because I didn't get it. And I think relationships have become so important to me, that I really want to invest in them. And so I think that to me, that's part of transparency. I just want to be really transparent. It's like, yeah, I like you. I respect you. I love you. I care about you. Want you to know that. It's funny when I think about which of my friends are able to be on that same level and which aren't. If I have got these two best friends that I've known probably since kindergarten, and one of them is a lot like me, that he's super emotional, hugs, and you know, we hug every time we see each other, and we say I love you, and we leave, and that sort of thing. And then the other one, and these two are like best friends too with each other. So they're really familiar with each other. But the other one, like he's weirded out when I give him a hug, and you know, I say I love you, and he'll say like, oh, hearts and farts or something, you know. Like he can't bring himself to do it. And and I know that he loves me. But I also, you know, I know his family really well, and know, you know, how lovey-dovey they aren't. So I think it's fun to notice which of my friends can be on that level, and which ones I know like really care about me, but they don't feel comfortable using the language.
Yeah. I'll tell you this, when it comes to who you spend your time with, right? This is interesting, that I've noticed a change in how I act and who I approach versus who I don't approach. Like, okay, I'm 44. I've recently discovered that, like, I guess you can call it like a midlife crisis. Like, I'm going through that right now, which is another part of this whole recipe of why we're doing this. But I've hit a point in my life where I don't want to give any time to people that I'm not interested in, or people who I don't feel deserve my time, because I just don't like what they're doing, whether it's values or actions or words. I don't want to spend time with people that I don't want to spend time with. Yeah. And so I feel like I am now going to double down on any type of relationship that I have or want, because I want to spend time. I want to spend as much time. Let me back up one second. What I've realized is it's not about necessarily the experience, but it's who you are sharing these experiences with. That right there has kind of sunk into me, and I just want to be around good people, dude.
Yeah. That's solid. I like that a lot. I honestly kind of feel like that's been my life philosophy all along, which is why
Yeah.
I say I have best friends from kindergarten.
Yeah.
I've envisioned life as a lifelong process of picking and choosing the best people along the way. And I've
Yeah.
just like
I
I
like
just
that.
have this collection of awesome people, all the best people that I've met in all of my life. I've just hung on to,
Hmm.
and for that reason, I have really really good people in my life. I think I had 15 groomsmen in my wedding,
Oh,
which I know
wow.
is ridiculous. And actually, there were people that I felt like I could have, even more people that I felt like I could have had
Yeah.
in the wedding party. And it's just that's how much I appreciate all of these people that I've collected along the way. So
Yeah.
I feel really fortunate that I feel like I've been doing that forever.
Yeah.
And yeah, and why I feel fortunate that, like, I don't know, we captured lightning in a bottle somehow with the friends that our kids just happen to make friends with each other, and then
Yep.
their dads, just moms and dads, just happen to be really cool. And yeah, I don't know, it's really neat. So I'm happy for you that you're arriving at that.
Yeah. So now I have to ask you kind of a professional question here. And that is, when you are talking to men throughout the course of your day or the course of the year, what seems to be the common themes of why a man may need to talk to someone or a therapist or
Ah,
pull the trigger to get to talk to somebody like you?
yeah, yeah. That's a really good question. There isn't just one thing. I will say, just to preface my answer, as a male therapist, I do see a lot of male clients. A lot of men feel more comfortable talking with another man. A lot of men don't want to go to a female counselor,
Hmm.
so I do have a lot of females on my caseload as well. But I think disproportionately more men than women because I'm a man, and I knew that was going to happen when I left my job to start my own private practice. The main reasons that I see men seeking therapy are to improve communication. Oftentimes, there's problems in their primary relationship, in their romantic relationship, whether that's with a wife or a girlfriend or a same-sex partner. But just communication is just an enormous one. And I could maybe even split. It's probably 75-25. 75 being like, hey, I really want to like improve my communication and get things worked out, to 25%. Oh, my partner told me I should
Oh,
come to counseling. But I hear that a lot, like, oh, my wife said I should come to counseling, or oh, my partner said I'd really benefit, or
hmm,
the I appreciate it, but the amount of referrals that I've gotten, like the this is a really common dynamic. The wife will be in therapy, and she'll have a feeling that the husband would benefit from therapy also, and so the wife's therapist will recommend me for their husband, and so then the husband will reach out to me and say, hey, like, my wife's doing therapy with so and so, she thought it'd be a good idea if I talk to you, so here I am.
hmm,
So I get that pretty often, but the often it revolves around communication. A really neat thing that I didn't expect, that I've just learned from experience, is how big-hearted men are and how hard they're really trying. I kind of, this is a bias that I had even against men. I kind of thought that I would see a lot of like rough and gruff men that blamed their wives and just blamed everybody else. And oh, if they would just F and do this and that, and if they would just change this and that, then blah, blah, blah. And man, by and large, my male clients do not shit on their partners.
hmm.
I've said so many times, and I've just like surprised myself. And again, this is my own bias,
Hmm.
but I've surprised myself with how many times over the years I've said to my male client, I am really impressed with how respectfully you talk about your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whatever.
Yeah.
I had this bias that they would be rougher and gruffer. And, even if when you and I have had our own personal conversations about life and
Hmm.
parenthood and marriage and all of the things, like, you're highly respectful. of your wife. You never put her down. You never shit on her. I hope that I do the same. But that's been a really neat, eye-opening thing to me is how I think men get shit on in the media a lot. And in my experience, getting to see behind the curtain of a lot of men's lives, they're not as bad as they're made out to be. And that's been a heartwarming thing to me. I try to apply it to myself. Like, yeah, Kyle, you're trying, you care.
Yeah.
So the communication, to back to your question about what brings them in, communication, and they want their relationships to go better because they care. They're not trying to walk away. And I guess, obviously my sample size or my sample is going to be skewed because I'm probably more likely to get the guys in counseling that actually want to stick around. I'm not getting the guys that are going out and cheating. I'm not getting, guys aren't coming into my office that are just like, dealing with their feelings in a toxic way. I'm getting guys, but the guys that I'm getting are like construction dudes, police officers. They're guys that would have a bias of thinking that they were probably a little rougher dudes.
Yeah.
And they come in and they care so much about their relationships, and they're like, I need to be better at expressing my emotions. It is anger stuff sometimes, with a really common theme of the guy just stuffing everything down until he boils over and explodes, and that does not in a violent way, but just like, has an emotional explosion. So it's really a lot of communication. I also get a lot of like, just help me understand my emotions. Like, I don't even know. I get so many guys that are like, I don't even know what to call this. I can't put my finger on what I'm thinking or feeling. And my wife will ask me what I'm feeling, and I don't even know what to tell her. So I have to do a lot of really basic education around just emotional education, emotional labeling. And that kind of surprised me in a good way that they would want to come and do that. So communication. I think a lot of guys that I work with are really, really frustrated. They're really frustrated in their relationships. They feel powerless in their relationships. They feel like they've tried everything, and they feel like they have a partner that isn't trying. They feel like their relationships are really one-sided, that it's really just they feel like they're supposed to work on themselves, and they feel like their partner just gets a free pass to not have to work on themselves. That's a pretty common theme. And they're really frustrated, and they don't know what to do about that. And they're saying like, oh, my wife or my girlfriend like has all of these, struggles in their lives, which is fine and normal stuff. But like, they're saying like that she's not dealing with them. She's not doing anything about it. And I feel powerless. I try to help her. She doesn't want my help. I give advice. She doesn't want my advice. If I try to empathize, she's just mad at me. And it's kind of funny how you would think that your spouse would be a person that you would listen to, and lean on and rely on. And that's a thing that surprised me from talking to so many people is how many people don't lean on their spouse and don't rely on them. And like the one person they won't hear feedback from is their partner. And they might hear it from a friend, like, oh, you should do this or you should do that. If a spouse, whether, husband or wife or, boyfriend or girlfriend gives some feedback or critique or advice, the partner just doesn't want to hear it. It's like there's a friction built up there and stuff. So that's been surprising. Yeah.
I don't know. I laugh a lot at a lot of things, especially if they're really relatable. But like when there was this meme where it's like a man offering a woman advice, and she takes the plate of food and just like launches it across the room. But then when her friends offer her the same exact advice, it's just a picture of them eating all of the food. And so like just from a relatable standpoint, I understand that.
Right.
Like I understand. So
yeah. I think it's tricky too, because men, just to generalize this is not 100% true, but just generally speaking, men are pretty solution oriented,
Mm-hmm.
and women tend to be more emotionally focused. And
Mm-hmm.
so, if a guy's wife is going through whatever issue, and then the guy wants to help her, and so he's saying like, "Oh, why don't you try this, or why don't you do this or that?" Um, she doesn't want to hear that.
Yeah.
She might even already know, but she's not in the mode of wanting to hear solutions. And so then there's friction. Then she's like, that's not helpful. And then he feels rejected, like, geez, I'm trying to help, but you don't want to hear it. And then
Right.
resentment builds on both sides. And I think just a chasm forms between the two partners. Now, obviously, I'm generalizing. I'm not saying that every
Right.
man is like that, and every woman is like that, and every relationship is like that. But that's a pretty common
Yeah.
dynamic, I think.
So do you feel like once there's that crack, and if it's not mended, then it's almost like a festering wound that will just continue to grow and grow and grow until it becomes irreparable?
Yeah, basically. I don't know that I would go to unrepairable, but I do think it's a crack that just widens and widens and widens. I think most of the time it is repairable, actually. I think another thing that I've really learned through experience with counseling that I didn't learn in a book is the importance and the role of humility, and how someone has to humble themselves to come back together with their partner, regardless of which side you're on. If you think you've been wronged, or you think the other one's wronged you, or you're the one that's in the wrong, whatever the case may be, it's really hard. Most of the time, both sides feel like they have legitimate points. Everybody feels justified to feel how they feel. And that's where I start with people in counseling. Like, yeah, makes sense why you feel how you feel. You told me about how your partner feels. Makes sense why she feels how she feels. So what now? You both just sit in being right, and neither of you are happy? Like, that sucks.
Yeah.
So oftentimes, both people have to humble themselves to say, hey, this is how I feel. This isn't how I want things to be, though. Let's both start taking some actions to come back together. I really like the idea of utilizing the most generous interpretation. And I don't know if you've ever heard that expression before, or that concept, but it's really powerful. It's a thing that I try really hard to apply to my own life. So it's utilizing a generous interpretation, the most generous interpretation. So basically what you do mentally is, any situation that you're in, you just try really hard to default to being as generous as you can with that other person. So if we were late, if I was late to get on this meeting with you, instead of you being like, God damn it, Kyle, like, come on, man, it's not hard to be on time, you'd be like, you know what? I know Kyle cares. I guarantee he's trying. Like, probably something came up. He'll be here as soon as he's able. And when he gets here, I'm just going to be like super cool to him, because I bet he's like not wanting to be running late either. Yeah. So when you have that generous interpretation, you're not riling yourself up. Then when I show up, you're so much better able to just be cool to me. So then I'm not met with negative energy from you, because I probably already am like feeling like an idiot because I'm running late. That's just an excuse. I wasn't late today, but I often am. But anyway, then when I join with you, you have this like kinder energy towards me that helps me relax. And so then in turn, I'm able to treat you well. And it just starts this positive cycle. And so, we can do it. Man, I use this with my kids. Like, the deal. When they're hungry and they're tired and they're strung out on electronics or whatever the case may be, or it's just gotten too late and the day's gotten away from you and they're just like turning into pumpkins because the magic
Exhausted.
is gone. Yep. I would be like, oh, you guys, like, this is not hard. You know what the bedtime routine is. You know what we're supposed to do. Like, why are you talking to me like that? Why are you hitting your sister? All the things, right? And since I've been practicing utilizing the most generous interpretation, man, it helps me zoom out and go, all right, this little boy's hungry. He's overly tired. It's not that he's being a jerk. He just can't control his emotions right now. I just need to be a safe, calm presence. I need to not add fuel to the fire with my own anger, which is something that I would do before, because I would get, and not that I never do it, but I used to do it way more often, that I would then chime in with my frustration. That never helped either. So I still do get frustrated, but the most generous interpretation really helps me to chill the heck out. And I try and use it with my wife too when I find myself ruminating about something that she did that irritates me, or something that I thought we agreed upon but she's doing the opposite, or whatever grudge I'm holding against her, and I feel so justified to feel how I feel, and maybe I am, and that's fine, but it's also not helpful. When I remind myself to use the most generous interpretation that I can, man, I notice my thoughts and my feelings soften. I'll start thinking thoughts like, you know what, Kyle, like, she's freaking overwhelmed as hell too. She had a long day. She has a lot on her mind. You know, she's already stressed. You know, she didn't sleep that well last night because one of the kids got up in the middle of the night, and all this stuff. And then it really just helps to get me out of my own head and my, you know, I'm ashamed to say I have like a well-rehearsed negative thought pattern, you know, that I'm like it's easy for me to go quickly into my like anger and pissed off and resentment and grudge holding for like, oh, yep, here's that again.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's a negative thinking habit that I've gotten into over the years that I don't like. And it's not helpful. It's not good for me to live in that space. It's toxic to my marriage and to my relationships with my kids. And so this idea of the most generous interpretation really helps pull me out of that and see them as a human and treat them how I would hope that someone would treat me if I wasn't at my best. Because that's how I want to be. If I'm like I've thought this before. When I'm like pissed off and frustrated and I'm like, oh, this and that and these little things and oh, it doesn't need to be like this and we've had this conversation before and da-da-da-da. How do I wish someone would treat me? Like I calm down a lot if my wife gives me a hug or something, rather than if she responds with defensiveness, that chasm gets a little wider. Yeah. And a little wider and a little wider each time we don't show up for each other. So if I can show up with more softness, then I'm doing less damage and actually maybe even like narrowing the divide.
Yeah. That's a great point. And that's something, honestly, I am trying to be, again, I didn't say I am, I said I'm trying to be the most positive person in the room, in the house. That's my goal. Is like, I'm always trying to, it's going to be okay. You're going to do fine. Like, can't sit here and sulk. Like, let's go. Let's, keep the ship moving forward type of approach in life. Yeah. And sometimes it's really hard. And I catch myself going down the negative road, but it's almost like I am a kid. I'm tired. I'm frustrated. Maybe I was in front of my computer too long today and I didn't get to go on a walk outside or take a breath of fresh air. Yeah. And I catch myself doing that and I'm just like, okay, all right, dude, you got to get your, like, I try to course correct myself at times. And I notice that when I am positive, like energy from a positive or negative standpoint snowballs. So I have noticed that if I am a negative presence in the house is negative. I know that when my wife is negative, there's more of a negative presence in the house. But I know that if one of us is positive and then the positiveness tries to grow, and I always feel like positive energy is the equilibrium, if that makes sense. Like, nobody wants to be in a bad mood. Everybody wants to be in a good mood. So if I can find that positive energy, then the house finds that equilibrium of positive energy. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Agreed. There's this, that's not really a theory. It's just a thought that there's no such thing as an adult. Like at what point do you magically turn into an adult that should have it all together? Like, it's really not a thing. Like, your brain does develop and reach a point where it's basically developed, even though our brains are continuously developing. But I've been, you said something that triggered that thought. You were like, I turn into a kid, or I'm basically a kid. And I've caught myself feeling that way before too, where I'm like, I'm just as mad and just as frustrated as like my kids are. And then I think, wow, Kyle, like you're no different from them right now, and you're
Right.
42. Like, what are you doing? You're harping on them to like calm down and
Exactly.
chill out. Like, why don't you do that?
Yeah.
Um, Another thing that I've learned from counseling is how purposeful we have to be with our headspace, how purposeful we have to be with our mental health. I think most of us are just enmeshed with our thoughts, and however we feel is however we feel, and we feel totally justified to be that way, and we don't put much thought into like, well, how do I want to feel, and then
Yeah.
fighting for that. And so what you were just explaining was you identifying how you want to feel and then taking actually an active role in your own mind and body to fight for how you actually want to feel. And that to me is how you fight for your own mental health. We can't just rely on what our default just happens to be, because I think that's often negative because our brain's always searching for negative things. That's what's sexy and attractive to our brains. And so we have to train ourselves to have those more helpful thoughts. I think that's really cool how you laid that out.
Yeah. And there's days where it's hard to do, right? Especially when you're met with negativity. And it's almost, and I think this is what's hard for men, and maybe you can shine some insight on this.
Yeah, I'm pretty
But there's times where men are very competitive and we don't want to lose.
Yeah.
We don't want to lose, even if it's something simple. And so there's a lot of times where I feel like I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to take this L and I'm going to be positive. One reference that I always like to make sometimes, not to my kids, but to like older people, like older adults, maybe my age, maybe younger, whenever I get an opportunity to talk with them and maybe they're having a bad day, is sometimes life serves you a shit sandwich. And there's times where you just got to eat it with a smile on your face and take that L and sacrifice whatever it is that you need to sacrifice to keep that ship moving forward, whether that is your professional life or your home life, your marriage, your relationship with your kids, whatever. And then express that gratitude or positive energy after you've eaten a shit sandwich. Now, where I struggle with is there's times where I feel like I'm eating a shit sandwich every day. And how do I communicate that I don't want to eat shit sandwiches anymore? Right. It's like, okay, I'm full on shit. Like I don't want any more of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you, that's an interesting concept. Can you give me an example of what that looks like, say with your kids?
Yeah.
In parenting? Of taking an L for the greater good. I think it's basically that. Maybe that's another way of saying what you're saying. Taking an L for the greater good.
So I would say that there's times where I don't necessarily want to say I'm a control freak. There's certain parts of my life where I am a control freak, and I think this is one thing I've actually learned from my wife on maybe to like relax a little bit on. I used to be the guy who was bedtime is this time. It is right now. We're going to get ready 30 minutes early. The teeth will be brushed so that at this time it's bedtime.
Yeah.
Right? It's bedtime. And that way I have just a shred of time to myself or with my wife at the end of the day. That's all I really want. Yeah. And oftentimes that's bedtime gets stretched out. And now it's not this anymore. And the kids are getting older. So now as they get older, maybe they stay up a little later or we're doing some activity or something like that gets in the way of this structure. And so one thing that I have eaten, what I feel I'm eating the shit sandwich for, was I want bedtime to be a specific way, and it doesn't happen that way. And so instead of stomping my foot and going, screw this, I'm pissed, I just eat the sandwich and then I coast into bedtime instead of shutting the prison gates at bedtime, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Fair. Okay. I think you're tapping into a couple of different things there. I think one being choosing your battles. You're learning to choose
100%.
your battles.
100%. 100%.
There's life is frickin' humbling, isn't it?
Oh,
Didn't
without
you
a doubt.
think? I thought parenting was going to be a lot different. I thought that my kids were going to listen to me a lot more than they do. How come they're not just
Wrong.
motivated to listen to dad? Dad's so wise. I'm so nice. I'm so kind. I'm so fun, and we have so much
Generous.
fun. And hey, when it's time to get off the iPad to get ready for bed, why wouldn't you just do that? I asked you
Exactly.
nicely. Oh my gosh, and it just doesn't happen like that. And that's another
Right.
really common thing that brings people into counseling too, is like this enormous difference between expectations and reality. And we
Yeah.
have these expectations that we clutch to and cling to, and then when it doesn't happen like that, we're so frustrated. So, but I do think it's multifaceted. I think the one thing is like having reasonable expectations. One thing is choosing your battles. One thing is the idea of flexibility versus rigidity. That, you know, even if you are really rigid and very scheduled, and bedtime is at this time every night, and you'd start getting ready at this time, and like, you know, ideally that would be awesome if it worked out that way, and then it just doesn't. I think a place where couples can make things either a lot easier on themselves or a lot harder on themselves is that's a classic place where two parents aren't on the same page.
100%.
And I think that's a place that I really freaking wish society did a better job at teaching us how to work together to parent.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I have what I think bedtime should look like, and my wife has what she thinks bedtime should look like, and we have vastly different styles, and neither of us are necessarily right or wrong. I think I could make a strong case for why I'm right. You know, and it doesn't go that way, but man, I wish that partners, generally speaking, could learn about getting on the same page with things so that they don't have these constant ongoing disagreements in how things work. Because in my experience, if a couple shows a united front, like the kids will follow suit. And yeah, kids are always going to be difficult, but it's hard when one parent's structured and the other's like pretty permissive. That's a really difficult dynamic. It would be so much better if the parents could sit down and say, listen, what's our common ground on bedtime here? Because this isn't working well.
Yeah.
I think constantly taking the L and eating the shit sandwich, I think that's an okay short-term strategy. I don't necessarily think it's a great long-term strategy because I think it's going to end up building resentment. I think we only have so many. I think even a person with the hugest container for being able to like contain frustration, it's just a matter of time till that container fills up, and then the person like can't take it anymore, and they're like, this isn't like, I've been going against what I really think for a long time here, and I'm fed up with it. I think that's another place where partners need to be humble, and both partners need to be able to hear like, hey, it can't be your way all the time, and it can't be my way all the time, and we can't develop a pattern of I just always submit to you and acquiesce to what you want to do. You know, often whichever partner's the most stubborn wins. And that's not even about being right. It's not about which partner's the healthiest. It's not about which thought process is the most correct. It's just about who's the most stubborn.
Yeah.
And I don't like that at all. That's a pretty toxic, and that could be either partner. I'm not saying that's always women. I'm not saying that's always men.
100% though.
I just think generally speaking, I hate the dynamic of whoever's the most stubborn wins. And if the other partner is also plenty stubborn, but they're just 1% less stubborn, then they're just always eating a shit sandwich. And I'm not saying that's what's happening with you and your wife. Now I'm just speaking very generally.
Yep.
I think that crack just widens and widens and widens because eventually the one that feels like they're always losing is starting to be like, I'm not secondary here. I'm not a secondary parent. Like my thoughts and feelings matter just as much as the others. And I think that's a place that resentment can grow. And again, I don't think that, you know, there are actually classes that people could take. And I think that and I'm guilty of this as well. I would like to just do more education about parenting and being, you know, having a healthy marriage and healthy communication. So I think those are really normal places that friction happens.
Which is why we are here and
Yeah.
doing what we're going to be doing here.
Yeah.
Does this, like what you've just kind of said, does this boil down to communication, or is there actually a change that, like a personality change, or some type of communication change that has to happen in any type of relationship, being with a child or being with a wife or a partner?
Can you rephrase that question? You say it again in a different way.
So is there a, does this whole conversation come down to communication, or does somebody have to actually change a belief or a value or adjust it in order to
Yeah.
make something work?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I think likely both. I think there are probably some times where it can just be communication, and a couple can iron out that wrinkle and be like, "Oh, okay, cool. Glad we got that straightened out." I do think there's often a deeper dynamic happening where there's just conflicting values, or competing values. And this is another hard thing. So this idea of competing values or conflicting values. So like, let's say that your value is like, I want my kids to be on a schedule. I want them to have bedtime be predictable. And the longer that we do that for, the more it'll just become ingrained, and then they will just do it. And bedtime basically runs itself. And that would be really healthy for the kids. And we wouldn't have to go through the battle of bedtime every night. Okay, if you express that to somebody, they would likely say, "Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. That sounds reasonable. I can see why you would feel that way." So cool. So that value's fine. And then another person could have the value of like, "Yeah, kids are kids and they're in the middle of stuff and like they're tired and they're hungry, so you have to be like kind of flexible and you have to kind of read the room and stuff." And I think if somebody was just looking at that explanation, they would say, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. I hear you." But what do you do when one person feels this way and the other person feels this way, and those two things clash? So on their own, neither one is wrong, but when the couple's not on the same page, now there's a problem.
Yeah.
So, but both people are going, "I'm right, I'm right." It's like, okay, fair, you're both right, but it's not working, is it? So
Right.
sometimes someone does have to change a belief or be willing to make a concession or a compromise in some way. Yeah, so sometimes it's as easy as ironing out a wrinkle in communication, and other times it's having to say, "All right, what are our real values behind this, and what can we both, what, how can we make our values align?" And I kind of like the idea of saying like, "Sell me on your value, and let me try to sell you on my value, and let's decide which one we're going with, because like us coming at this from two different ways is not working."
Yeah. And so I think this is where there's a lot of turmoil in the waters, is when someone is trying to, like, maybe meeting in the middle and trying to meet in the middle for the greater good. And it's almost like perspective, right? So yes, I'm going to meet in the middle with my partner about bedtime or whatever the case, whatever you enter example here type of scenario. But it's maybe how you look at it, where some people look at it as like, I took a loss, I'm eating a shit sandwich, versus I'm doing this for the greater good, which if you continue to think you're losing when maybe you're really not, like I can see that just like almost a cancer building and building and building.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. I think you have to be careful if you feel like you're sacrificing your values, that's gonna end up really like being a pebble in your shoe.
Yeah.
It's not it starts off as not a big deal, but you walk 100 miles and it's gonna frickin' suck after a while.
Right.
I think that's where, I know I've used the word humility multiple times, but humility and caring about what the other person thinks and feels. Like I would need to be, this isn't necessarily the dynamic with my wife, but for me to be a skilled partner and a healthy partner, it would likely be wise of me to be paying attention to how my wife's feeling like that. Like, it wouldn't necessarily be good for me to be winning every argument if she feels like she's losing every argument. You know, there's a line of thought that's similar to, there's you never want to win an argument with your wife because you never want your wife to lose.
Right.
So it's we need to figure out how we can both feel good about this. And it's, it would be wise of me to be empathetic enough to kind of keep my finger on the pulse of how my partner's doing.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, she's always frustrated. She's always frustrated with me. We're constantly disagreeing. I'm always winning out. What might that be like to be her? Like,
Yeah,
how
exactly.
might she feel? And it's like, she might feel like shit. And if that's the case, then, man, even if I'm, air quotes, winning, boy, am I really though? Or is there something that's eroding so that I can win? And I would say that to both sides, like, how is your partner doing?
Exactly.
And maybe you would be, if this is really your person that you choose for the rest of your life, you better frickin' make it worth it for them to stay with you.
Exactly.
Because that would suck to be in a dynamic where you feel like you're always losing and you always
100%.
feel like the other person's, like, you guys always have to default go with the other person's ideas. It's like, am I not 50% of this?
Exactly.
Like, I thought I was, but I'm getting 0% of my way.
Right. And I think that's something that over time people don't understand, is in order to make this unit, which is a family, or the foundation, this is what I've taken away from my marriage so far, is when we work well together, the family runs like a well-oiled machine. But when we are not, then everything else falls apart.
Yeah.
And so I actually put a ton of my energy, like, it's almost like my kids are secondary, because I can't truly give them what they need or the best version of myself if I'm struggling, whatever given day or week or month in my marriage. And the whole thing around this conversation is, this shit is not easy.
Yeah.
Being a dad is hard.
Yeah.
Being a husband is hard. Being a man in this world is hard, right? And you can sit there and you can collapse under its pressure, or you can be active in trying to make all of these aspects in your life better.
Yeah.
And so, and have that positive energy and move forward.
Yeah. Agreed. No, I like that. That's a thing that I've been hearing more about, is putting your kids second and keeping your relationship with your partner first, because that's the foundation. If your foundation's weak, then everything you're building on top of it is in danger, even if it doesn't seem like it. It really is. And that's I'm not saying my relationship with my wife is in danger, but that's definitely a thing that I think I could do better, would be to reinforce that connection more, because I think, hearkening way back to what we talked about near the beginning of our conversation, of how much more involved we are with our kids and how much more time we spend with them and how much they are the center of our world. There's a chance that the pendulum swings too far in that direction. And so
100%.
we're not spending enough time with our wives. And, like, we constantly say we need date night, but we don't make it happen. Actually, like, a nice thing that I think that we do for each other is, like, I'll hang with the kids while she gets to go and spend time with friends, and she hangs with the kids while I get to go spend time with with friends and blow off some steam. But it's pretty rare that we have somebody else watch the kids so that she and I can go
100%.
blow off some steam. And I think that's a major miss. And I would really like to spend more one-on-one time with her and more time without the kids around, and just appreciate her and keep that friendship built. It's funny because, like, these friends that I get together with, that she gets together with, like, those friendships are getting maintenance.
Yeah.
Man, there's a friend. Oh, I've got this friend that lives like an hour away, and I love him, and it's really rare that I get to see him, and so, like, every once in a while I'll go up there and spend the night and hang out with them, and that it felt so good to reconnect with them, and I really missed that guy. Man, I feel that way towards my wife too. But we don't take just a getaway And I know
Yep.
some couples do, and that's freaking beautiful. That's a thing that I
Yep.
need to do more often, because I'm not doing that enough of that maintenance of the friendship with my wife, because there's a reason why I married her. She's awesome. She's super fun. She's super funny. She's like the sweetest person on the planet, and we're just like in this kind of co-parenting loop, because life is so freaking busy. But I will go take a night or a whole day to go hang out with friends because I miss them, and I
Yeah.
really want to like reconnect and get together with them. Man, I miss my wife too, and I live with her.
Yeah. Yep. Dude, I feel that. I feel
Yeah.
that. And so we've talked a lot today about a whole bunch of different things, right? And as this podcast continues, I think what you're going to see from us is a little back and forth of like what we've had. But at the same time, I feel like we're going to get into some specifics, right? Where we pick a topic and stay on that topic for the entire episode. I'm sure when life happens, we're going to throw what I like to call a BS session in there, where we just do kind of what we did today. But hopefully this episode has brought a little bit of some insight to who we are, what the goal of this podcast is. I think our personalities are going to shine as we get moving forward, and we talk about how crazy our lives are with our jobs, our marriages, our children. And I think the goal here is to be as relatable as possible with Kyle's professional background as the kind of the cherry on top of all of this. So any final thoughts before we shut episode 0 down?
No, that was fun. I was really nervous to do that, and you made me feel really comfortable. Thank you very much, man. Thanks for inviting me to do this, and kind of help push me out of my comfort zone in that way. Appreciate it. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, awesome. So I will say this, that if you are interested in consuming more of this podcast, it's going to launch everywhere that podcasts can be downloaded. Spotify is popular, iTunes are popular, and then there's one of millions, it seems like, every place that podcasts can be downloaded. If you like this podcast and you feel like other men or other people should listen to it, well, share that, review us, give us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcast, share these episodes, and we would really appreciate that. So Kyle, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to do this. I know this is going to help me personally. And so I'm looking forward to continuing this and moving forward with this, man.
Oh yeah. Yeah, me too. I'm going to get a lot out of it, and I like hanging out with you. So thanks, man.
Now's the time for a great deal on a new Honda. It's time to take an adventure with rugged capability and commanding style. Check out the Honda Ridgeline, Pilot, Passport, or CRV. For a limited time, well-qualified buyers can get a 1.99% APR on a 2025 Ridgeline or a 3.99% APR on a 2025 Pilot, 2026 Passport, or 2025 CRV.
See dealer for financing details.
At Capella University, you can learn at your own pace with our FlexPath learning format. Take 1 or 2 courses at a time and complete as many as you can in a 12-week billing session. With FlexPath, you can finish the bachelor's degree you started in 19 months and under $19,000. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu. Fastest 25% of students. Cost varies by PACE, transfer credits, and other factors. Fees apply.